Right, in this video we'll be looking at going through the key success criteria for these 4 questions in this exercise. This is an elective geography food resource exercise. Title of the exercise is Food Resources Test 2. There are 4 questions in this exercise for a total of 18 marks. The first 3 questions are your standard structured response questions, and the last one is an open-ended question. Looking at question 1, it says discuss and list the health and economic impacts of excessive food consumption. Now, keywords within this is you are looking at both health and economic impact. The other thing is the root cause that is leading to these impacts is excessive food consumption. Okay, so let's take a look at one of the examples from one of the candidates. This candidate here has a pretty comprehensive answer, a few key problems. He actually talks about obesity. He brings up the fact of obesity and some of the issues that can come up and what can lead to obesity. However, there is no specific explanation of what is overweight in terms of food consumption, nutrient consumption, and there is also no mention of obesity related illnesses. So things like your high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, stroke, diabetes, these are all examples that should be included, but this candidate has left out. Next up, we're looking at question 2 with reference to examples. Explain the problems caused by food wastage. 3 marks. So let's take a look at an example. This candidate here talks about how much food and gives a specific area where there is food waste, but he also talks about additional waste, disposing it in landfills and putting additional stress on it. However, there's no mention on the definition of food waste and how it's actually generated. Now, given that the question revolves around this concept of food waste, it is important that you start with a definition and you provide some form of a context for the rest of your answers. So please remember, in this particular case, it's a good answer, however, it's missing the fundamental part, and as a result, it only gets 2 out of 3 marks. Now, for question 3, we're looking at explanation as to why the incidence of obesity is higher in the developed countries than in LDCs. So there's a need to focus on the difference between a DC and LDC and whether it is actually true that you do have more obese people in DCs. So let's take a look at another example. In this case here, the student talks about it being more common in developed countries and talks about this concept of higher disposable income, henceforth stronger purchasing power, and leading to higher calorie intake of people in DCs. It would be useful if we can talk about how disposable income links directly to calorie intake. So that concept is missing in this place here. It is also useful at the end, if you can, to talk about beyond what the candidate said about potato chips and fast food, which are high fat and easily available in DCs. Also to talk about LDCs as they progress upon the development scale. What happens with money, increased disposable income, and why is it that they spend it more on food? Now for question 4, the question is the diet phenomena can only have negative effects on health. How much do you agree with this statement, and explain your answer? Like all open-ended questions, we require you to first talk about the given factor, give a clear explanation of the given factor, then give a contrast factor before concluding, and make sure that conclusion actually ties in with your initial stand. So first and foremost, you have to take a stand. How much do you agree with this statement? Do you agree a lot with it, or do you only agree with a small extent? EXTENT, please do not write EXTEND. I still have several students who commit this error. Secondly, when you start, we're looking at negative effects on health. There are other negative effects of the diet phenomena. Some are social, some are political, and some are even economic. However, we are only looking at individual health effects. So if you do not focus on health effects, or worse still, you do not touch on health effects at all, you will not have answered the question, and it's very likely that you have a 0. So given the factor here is negative effects on health, you have to clearly explain what it is, give a few examples of what are some of these negative effects on health and how they affect the individual. However, there is a need to bring an opposite contrasting factor, which means that you need to talk about any positive effects that the dieting phenomena might bring to the individual. Another area that you can talk about would be economic impacts, but that is not going to be the main focus of your argument. So at the end, in this particular case here, from a logic standpoint, you cannot agree to a large extent, because there are positive impacts on health based on the dieting phenomena. If dieting is carried out positively and carefully, and it is well planned, coupled with exercise, it is not going to be negative only on health. There are people who will go on positive dieting plans and will actually become healthier. So you should not agree with the statement to a large extent. So please note, this is important, logic must prevail. And that brings us to the end of this very short analysis video.